Hey everyone, on this episode of Teeter Talks, I had a very brave, honest, tough, beautiful conversation with my guest, Vince Del Monte. He is arguably the number one online fitness business coach, helping fitness coaches build their online ventures to be incredibly successful businesses. He himself has built multiple seven-figure businesses, and yet his business accolades are not what drew me to him and not why I asked him to be a guest on my show. In fact, it was his story that he's shared so openly, with such vulnerability and raw emotion about his separation from his wife. And how he's handling that as a father of three and as someone who has pushed so hard to be successful and now is looking back on perhaps the sacrifices that he made, the lessons that he wish he would have learned sooner. And it's just such an interesting perspective, from a man and his journey and what he's going through. And I thought there was value in sharing it with all of you. It's a great conversation, and I hope that you will take from it the incredible wisdom that Vince shares around life and business and relationships. And I return the favor of vulnerability by myself also sharing some insights and a little bit of a confession off the top as well. So anxious to hear what you guys all think. Enjoy this conversation with Vince Del Monte. Hey, Vince, welcome to Teeter Talks.
Marissa, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's so funny that we're here. We have known of each other, maybe is the best way to put it, for over 20 years. We have a lot of friends in common, but we've never actually been in a room together that we
Mhm.
remember. But your name's
Yeah.
come up a lot recently, and I've been following you more closely on social, and I reached out, and you were so kind to agree to do this show with me. So thank you.
I'm honored to be here. Excited. Let's do
Thank
this.
you. Thank you. And right off the top, I think you and I just had a brave discussion, maybe more so brave on my end, but an honest conversation about how this podcast almost didn't happen for me, not for you. You've been wonderful and you've been so great. Um, a few weeks ago, I saw, just to put everybody in context, a few weeks ago is when former US President Donald Trump was shot at. And you posted something supporting him or perhaps showing your support for him. And my immediate reaction was, oh gosh, he's a Trump supporter. I can't have him on my show. And I think
Mhm.
about that and I think how terrible of me to be so quick to jump into that cancel culture, jump on that bandwagon, and take one little thing that maybe you and I don't see eye to eye on, which I'm not even sure if we see eye to eye because we haven't even talked about where we
Yep.
stand on the issue. And I've even shared with you that I'm not even familiar enough with his politics to probably have an opinion. It's more so how he shows up as a person in the world that I
Yeah.
find is maybe not the way I do it. Um, but I had to stop and go, shame on you, Marissa. You encourage people to have tough conversations all the time, and you're always trying to
Mm.
bring people to the table to have these moments. And the very reason that I reached out to you had nothing to do with your political views, and the reasons still remain very true, which we'll get into. So I just wanted to tell everyone that and be honest about the fact that, yeah, you and I have maybe different beliefs, or maybe how we share our beliefs politically and even around our faith is different how we show up and how we choose to
Mm.
share. But I still
Yes.
very much um, believe that my reasons for wanting to speak to you today are very true and valid. And we have a lot of other things in common that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm appreciative of you sharing that. Most people wouldn't mention that. I mean, I have quite a bit of experience with this territory. I was sharing with you before we started recording that, the pandemic, COVID, vaccines, masks, that almost split my family apart.
Hmm.
My brother, my middle brother Adrian, and I did not see eye to eye on the lockdowns and the severity of them, etc. And him and I, we did not like each other to a point
Mm,
where we did not speak to each other. My own flesh and blood, my brother Adrian, who I've like loved my entire life. We've like never had, we have had difference of opinions. He does see the world a little differently in
sure.
different areas. But what happened was we didn't speak to each other for a long time. And same thing that you just said. I actually didn't exactly know what how he was interpreting things, where he stood. So during the lockdowns, we decided to do 75 hard together in my basement, which would require us to train a couple times per week together. And the reason we chose that was so that we could just spend time together and
Mm,
reconnect, because it was creating a lot of division. My dad was getting all riled up.
mm.
My mom was sad. It was just,
Aw,
it's like, what the heck's going on here? Like, we're really going to let frickin', you know, politics, this is happening to our family now. I thought
right.
our family was like undestructible. Like, so him and I started training together. And after a couple weeks, we would start to get to know each other's perspectives. Long story short, we weren't actually as far off as we thought.
Yeah.
And it actually drew us closer together. And there's great book by Patrick Lencioni called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And I believe the number one thing that brings a team closer is, in fact, conflict. And a lot of
Mm,
people don't understand that conflict helps increase trust. It's like trauma in a relationship, in a marriage, where like when there's trauma, like it's just a bonding glue that leads to a stronger foundation. It's a
hmm.
scar, if you will. So a lot of people who are afraid to have these conversations are actually missing out on an opportunity to do, I think, what everybody's craving more than ever, which is to connect.
Yes.
And I don't think people should be fearful of conflict in the process of connection, as long as there's like a mutual respect. And I think the problem is that we have so many traumas from our past and insecurities that one person gets accusatory, another person gets defensive, and then you start throwing jabs, and then you're attacking the person. You're not attacking the arguments anymore, and that's
Right.
just probably a lack of just like this, like having back and forth with people that are, when you start getting triggered, temperature goes up. That's a skill set, to be able to like not react, and to be able to listen, and to
Yes.
bite your tongue, and to say, interesting, hey, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, they didn't see that. That's a cool perspective. I appreciate your insight. Yeah, I see it a little differently, but being able just to use language that is not like I need to be right. And I've always learned, like, you can either be right or you can be happy. You can be right or you can be connected, but it's tough to get both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know of several situations where it divided families or ruined friendships. I think that have since mended, but probably not forgotten those moments. And like you said, I mean, we have to force conversation. I think we also need to agree on the rules of engagement around respecting people. And you don't
Right.
have to agree with everyone. And just because you don't agree with someone or share their beliefs doesn't mean you have to not like them either. And
Right.
I'd like to foster more conversations, and that's exactly why we're having conversations today, is because you intrigue me. For those of you who aren't familiar with you, I mean, you are the quote unquote OG of online fitness and supporting people in building their businesses. You've helped thousands of people build very successful, very lucrative businesses that have ultimately changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Your track record in business is undeniable. And for anyone who follows you and those who don't, they will probably find you now. You'll see that you give great business advice. You give great life advice. You give great advice for people running online businesses or businesses in general within and with outside the fitness industry. And what attracted me to you and what I really wanted to talk about today was something that had nothing to do with all of that to a certain degree, was your incredible openness and vulnerability about recently separating from your wife. And I'll be honest, as a woman, I tend to get custody of the women in divorces. So I don't generally see things from the man's perspective, but man or
Mm.
woman, your perspective that you've been sharing on your social quite vulnerably and beautifully, I have to say, around going through this as a father of three kids, around looking back and seeing a lot of lessons, maybe seeing things a little more clearly now. I don't want to share the story for you because we'll get in that, but I just want people to know that, you know, there's this lovely duality about you that I really admire. And I think if people are following you online, they're definitely going to see the hardcore fitness, all business side of Vince. And then we get these really amazing glimpses of this incredibly vulnerable, sweet, kind, emotional, caring, reflective. And I think you're both people. I just think you maybe show one side more than the other. Maybe we'll see more of that side, but
Yeah.
is that contrived? Is it harder for you to show that side, or do you think maybe now you might show more of that?
I was disconnected from my heart for 42 years. And I
Oh,
learned a quote from my therapist. She said, "The furthest journey that a man will travel is 18 inches from his head to his heart." And most men don't even make it out of their head. Most men live from their heads their entire lives, and typically, build survival mechanisms, survival strategies that produce what would be considered success in the world. But a lot of these things are built out of insecurities from past traumas that have never been addressed, that have been suppressed, or people just aren't even aware of. And that was
mm,
me. I just, until I realized that there was something in my life that I could not control, which was when Flavia said, like, we're done. When I actually thought it was just going to be a short term thing. And she's like, no, like, I'm gone.
hmm,
When I realized that this was not something I could fix with a, 3-step action plan, and I was rejected, I realized, like, wow, like I had no idea that like I had to like that was a sledgehammer to the head. I honestly don't think most men wake up until they get a sledgehammer to the head, and it's extremely, they might even need a few sledgehammers to the head. Men are very, like, we're very disconnected, and I had to figure out why. So when I started doing some therapy, without going into like all the details, it was really simple. I mean, I just never was connected to myself. And it all
mm,
started off as a long distance runner in my teens when I experienced loss, disappointment, and rejection in the athletic realm. And that's what the therapist brings you back in time. Like, when did you
of
first feel
course.
this, have this feeling? And I realized that when we're supposed to win a championship race, long story short, we crap the bed and I smashed the window in my parents' car. I was so upset, and I remember that was the first time I experienced massive loss in my life. And it was interesting because loss, feeling behind, feeling average has always been a theme in my life,
Hmm,
which led to me becoming a very successful entrepreneur because I was able to build an identity around success. What I was really craving the entire time, not knowingly, it was connection. And she brought me back in time and she says, "Have you ever talked to that 15-year-old boy before?" And as soon as she said that to me, I said, "No." And then I started getting emotional.
hmm,
And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And then she said, "Do you want to talk to him right now?" And as soon as she said that, something cracked open inside of me and I just started gushing tears.
mm,
And it continued for about 45 minutes, and she coached me through, and I started to talk to my, little self, my little Vincey. My mom called me Vincey, so I started to call him Vincey. My low, not my lower self, my younger self. And I realized for the first time in my life, the reason that I wasn't able to connect with other people and I didn't put a currency on connections and relationships, because I never even done it with myself. I didn't see the importance, and I couldn't stop crying. And I said, "Why am I crying?" The only two times I ever really cried was when my uncle Bruno died and when my nonno Vince died. But I
mm,
never really cried in my whole life. And now I can cry at will. I could cry like every minute of the day. I could find something. I could look at something outside. I could start crying. I'm like, it's crazy. Like, I have a moment with my kids, I start crying. It's crazy. But I wasn't like this before. And I said, "What is happening? What is happening? I can't control this." And she says, "You're grieving."
mm,
I said, "Grieving what?" She said, "Loss. You've never grieved your entire life." And she said that crying is ice melting. You have put so much ice on you that you can't, like, people can't get close to you, and you don't let them be. And you put up this facade like, "Look, I don't need people. Look what I've built." And it even showed up in my relationship. One, I wasn't as close with my kids. And then also, like, our company, a lot of this stuff that really started to affect my relationship was I was unable to control my moods when we had bad sales days, or a team
Mm,
member left, or we lost a good client. I was emotionally unregulated. I was the dude that was emotionally unstable.
mm,
Like, I was the guy in the family where my family was like, what mood is Vince in today? If he had a good sales day, we're going to be good. And I would ruin Christmases, I would ruin Easters, I would ruin birthdays because of my mood. And I had to go on this journey to figure out what the heck has happened, because it wasn't a version of me that I was happy with or that was acceptable. But it all started with just trying to understand that, like, um, I never really had self love, self respect, which is listening to yourself, self compassion. Like, these were all weak traits. These were not the
mm.
traits that a masculine male, successful male would talk about or even embody. But it was the thing that caused me to lose the most important person in my life, which forced me to have to solve this. And honestly, if that didn't happen, I don't think I would have changed.
Wow. Well, first of all, this is the type of beautiful vulnerability I'm talking about, because I'm sure there's a lot of men listening out there, or even women listening, who are maybe seeing this in people and the men that they love. And I know you're not speaking for every single man. This is your experience, but I suspect
Yeah.
it's pervasive in a lot of ways. You made me think of a couple of things as you were speaking. First of all, this idea of, you're a successful entrepreneur. And a lot of entrepreneurs have this chip on their shoulders. Successful people, there's something sometimes that's fueling them, right? They're either, someone told them once upon a time they couldn't, and now they're just going to show the whole world that they can 1,000 times over, or something that just an insecurity, or something. And I think sometimes a lot of people don't, like you said, you bury it, you ignore it, you freeze it out, because it's part of your success recipe, is this
Right.
thing that it's almost like it's fueled you. And you kind of wonder if you would have been as successful without that thing. And
Yeah.
then the other piece is this idea of, and you go back to your younger self, there's this lovely quote that I love. Ed Milet, who's someone that I like, says, we're often, that our greatest, I guess, gift, and I'm going to butcher it, is our ability to go back and serve the person we once were. And it's like you've built this career around what that 15-year-old Vince would have needed, right? You're out there helping all these people, giving them confidence, giving them acceptance, giving them success, giving them approval, giving them the tools to feel good about themselves, that
Mm.
are things that obviously you probably craved and needed at that age and didn't get. And it's amazing that, you talk about therapy. I think it's amazing that you're going through this now and you've had all these revelations, but I'm curious about, because I think what makes this even more interesting is you and I have talked about success. And this is a topic I'm very, very, fascinated with when I speak to very, high performing individuals such as yourself. I'm curious about what you would have defined success as before your separation and what you define it as now.
Yeah, that's a great question, because you asked me just a little earlier, would I have been successful without this? And I think, I got a lot of, I wouldn't say criticism, but pushback from some of my higher level coaching students who
Mm,
specifically hired me to help them make more money. They did not pay me to learn about my therapy. They did not pay me to learn about my, personal issues. They hired me to make them more money. And I respect that and appreciate that. So there was pushback saying, like, but Vince, we want what you have. Like, I want that house that you have. I like the lifestyle you have. I want that. And now you're telling me all this other stuff that doesn't have anything to do with making money. And they felt
mm,
kind of gypped. And I
mm,
struggled with that at first. And what I had to do was, like, man, I could, you know, kind of appease to them, or I could tell them, guys, what I had wasn't success though. Like, what I had was not success. What you saw was a big house. What you saw was trips. What you saw was a facade. It wasn't really success. And, like, you don't want all of this effing money if you're disconnected with yourself and your loved ones and your kids. Like, that's not success. So I
mm.
had to really, it was a tough transition, and I did lose some members. I had a
Yeah.
great female coaching client who's like, she went to another coach because she just wanted the business tactics. She's like, I don't want to hear about any of this. So I sharing that though, and helping people build a better business, not a bigger business. That's kind of how my philosophy shifted. Let's build at a pace that's sustainable, and let's actually redefine success in the process. I mean, now for me, I mean, some days success is just still standing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Success some days is just like making sure my health is intact. I can still see my abs. Like health, like it's like that I haven't gone to the bottle, that I haven't,
Yeah.
gone to, different vices. And, a lot of people go down, like, can gets very dark, they end up in
Yeah.
really dark places. So for me, I had to redefine success as it's not a growth season right now, right? We're not scaling. This is stabilization season. I had to admit, like, hey, there's some days and months, this is survival season. And for a man to admit that we're in survival season, we're not thriving, we're not hitting our full,
Yeah.
I think
Killing it. Yeah.
that just puts more pressure on a man. And you said the word fuel source, which is actually one of my favorite words. It is the wrong fuel source. Like, I became successful by creating pressure. It was like everything I could possibly do to create pressure in my life, because pressure drove me forward. But it was it was a non-sustainable fuel source. So I think what we're talking about here today is a lot of people do become what would be considered successful, but it's from unsustainable fuel sources. And eventually you have to ask yourself, like, is if you can only be successful from pressure, eventually you're going to burn out. Like, you can't withstand the pressure forever. It will
Yes.
eventually win. And
Yeah.
that's what happened to me. I could not sustain the pressure. And I think a lot of men are afraid of that because they put so much stock in their character. Now, I also want to be very clear that men were designed to work. God created men in the garden to go work and to provide and to protect. Like, we were given very specific duties, responsibilities. If a man is not doing these things, he will not feel fulfilled. So I'm not sitting here saying that a man doesn't need to go out and work and go provide and protect and take care of his people. But there is a cost if that is the only thing that he does, right? God rested on the seventh day, right? Um, we were built for rest. And I think a lot of us miss that, and we see it as a weakness. And I see it as a part of my humanity. And it's something that
Yeah.
I see just a lot of men suffering in silence because there is this projection, like, I've got to have it all together. I'm not allowed to have a moment. And there's a fear too that if you take your foot off the gas, everything's going to crumble and I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to lose everything I built and I'm going to lose my persona, my reputation, my stat. Like, and I mean, that's a lie. I mean, and at the end of the day, you can't take any of this stuff with you anyways. So
Nope.
none of this comes with us. So I think,
Yeah.
materialism is a deadly god. So I think, for me, I kind of experienced all this stuff firsthand. So I'm not speaking from judgment, but like, I understand the drive for a man to want to take it to the top, but I also understand the cost of not managing these desires.
Yeah. It's so funny. All the guests that I've had on, in my opinion, are leading in some sort of remarkable way in their lives from all walks of life. But I think they are, you know, successful in their own right. But everyone, including myself, feels compelled. And you just did it, to use air quotes when we use the word success, because I think that we've made it this thing that is identified by things, be it a
Mhm.
number, be it a status, be it a title, be it a material. And I think where a lot of people who have ultimately experienced all those things end up landing is that you can get the house, you can get the money, you can get the title, but I doubt you're going to feel successful in that moment. You're going to have that constant thirst and pressure. And I appreciate what you're saying about your clients. I can see that, they want you to pay them to make money. That's what you've always done. You are the guy who teaches these people how to monetize what they do. But what you're actually doing is teaching them that I can help you monetize this for a short period of time, or I can teach you how to monetize this for a longer period of time. And I think that's what business owners need to wrap their head around. And I mean, I always go back to this idea of success being this holistic approach, right? It's not impressive to me if you have lots of money, but your health and your life and your family have fallen apart, or vice versa, right? I think you
Right.
have to have a certain element of quote unquote success in all areas of your life for me to look at you and go, wow, like they're kind of doing pretty well. I mean, it doesn't mean you're perfect in every area, but you haven't let a
Right.
major ball drop for a significant period of time. You'll ebb and flow for sure, but I appreciate people who can kind of do all the things. One of the things that you mentioned when we spoke was this idea of one-dimensional success, and that you don't want one-dimensional success. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I just think this whole concept, people, really knock the concept of balance and the idea of contentment and being, satisfied. I think those are like almost um, words that are considered, inferior, not inferior, but settling. Those are words
Yeah.
associated with like not fulfilling your full potential and wasting and being selfish with your skills and your talents and all that. So one dimensional is, I think, again, you never know what's going on in somebody's life, so I don't want to like judge. Like um the way I do things is not the way other people need to do things. Like my brother's really uncomfortable with how much I share socially about my marriage, because I feel like you're doing therapy on your social media. I'm like, dude, this is just who I am, man. I've been sharing openly about as much as like for 18 years. And a lot of people just will never go there. Um, and so to see somebody who only post fitness advice, I could say that's a one dimensional person. All he posts is fitness. I don't know what his relationship is like. Um, I think it's people who we idolize, people who we put up on a pedestal that have been very successful in one area of their life. It's easy to put a guy up on, a pedestal that's like, got $100 million business, but he specifically said, like, I don't want kids. I don't have any intention of having a family. Like, okay, so don't compare yourself to that guy. I would consider that, and there's nothing to knock from that guy. That guy's clearly doesn't want
No.
kids, but
He
that's like
probably has a
he is
lot more time on his hands.
yeah, he better
Yeah.
have a big business if that's all he
Yeah.
does. You have somebody who's just all they care about is their body. Well, you better have a good body if you don't have a relationship, or you don't have a business, or you don't have kids and stuff. You better
Yeah.
have a good body. You have all this time. So I just think for me, I think I want to be more well-rounded in the
Mhm.
essence of like I I am of the belief that you can't have it all. And if you're trying to build a massive empire, you're not going to probably have a super deep connected relationship. That sounds probably very judgmental, and it is. That's my position. I'm sure there are people out there, but I think for the majority of people, I think it's really tough to have something like so big, because it becomes an idol. It really becomes an idol,
Yeah.
and it gives somebody their identity. So how do you put somebody else first when you have this other thing that can give you fulfillment? And that's kind of like what happened even a bit in my marriage too. Like when we stopped, kind of giving each other the love languages, I got my fulfillment from my work, from the seven
Yeah.
figure mastermind, from my stages, from my podcast, from my views, from my comments, from my members, from the testimonials. If I wasn't getting the needs I needed in my marriage, I got them elsewhere. And that
Right.
becomes very dangerous, because guess what I do? I'm like, when we have a fight, it's not like, hey, I really care about you. I'd love to resolve this. Can we work through this? It's like, it wasn't like screw you, but it is kind of like screw you, because I don't need you.
Yeah.
I'm already
I have
getting my needs met over
millions of
here.
followers. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what
So
if
I think it's dangerous. I think you can run into
yeah.
issues that compromise relationships. That's what I wanted to say.
And I think it's a big lesson for a lot of people, because I know that successful entrepreneurs, business owners, and you've kind of said this. I mean, there's a certain level of sacrifice that comes in your life. Like you did say I don't think you can have it all. I mean, I agree. I think you don't have to have it all. You can. I think you can have it all actually, but it just depends what all means. I think we maybe need to reassess what all means.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to have the best, like all the time, all the things, all at once, no. I mean, life is going to ebb and flow, and some things will be doing better at certain times than others. And again, we need to reassess what all is and where our priorities are and what baskets we've filled, our efforts and energies with. But I also think too that maybe this is maybe this is the lesson. Maybe you can build the empire that you're after, Vince. Maybe you had kind of this dry run or this, and I'm not trying to paint your wife to be the sacrificial lamb or collateral damage in this life experience, but you've already mentioned you feel like a better father. You feel like a more connected person, a whole person. Your ability to run businesses is still the same. Maybe you'll just find a way to do it live differently. Maybe this was the
Right.
lesson, not that you wanted, but that you needed to say, hey,
Right.
There's a different way of building this empire that does not require this level of pressure or sacrifice or intensity.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And what happened was, yeah, just to the I do think you probably can have it all, but not all at once. I think that's a big
Mhm.
thing too. Like,
Yeah.
there's going to be, I see a lot of guys who are, they're having kids. I'm like, hey, I can again only reflect on my own life, but that's essentially when we built all the wealth when the kids were young, and she stayed at home, watched the kids and everything. However, that came with a price because she didn't feel supported at all. I thought
Yeah.
we were on the same page, but like I wasn't in tune with her needs of feeling supported and feeling like she had a partner while the kids were really young. I just thought like, but you have enough resources to get as much help as you want. Isn't that like that's how I'm contributing? But I never really connected with her
Hmm.
heart. So not knowing that like, hey, I can go up, but this is the season to build the wealth when the kids are little and we're getting ahead right now. I didn't realize like that was a season where, hey, I need to also make sure I stabilize this marriage. I got to make sure that like, I don't lose her in this process. And I think one thing men are very guilty of is we take people for granted. I do feel like most men are just kind of dumb, if you will, kind of like Rocky Balboa. I got what you call a punchy brain. Like they don't wake up like I'm going to screw over the world today. I think men are just disconnected. They're just not in tune that like this woman can walk. Your daughter can get upset with you and hold a grudge for you way longer than you expect. Like, if people don't feel appreciated, they will get up and leave. Like I just think we can like almost have this like, well, I'll just find another person. I'll just find another person. And it comes from this like belief that like, I just get it done, I'll just make it happen. When we start treating a lot of our relationships like transactions, and then there's a cost to that. So I was on another train of thought there. I forget the original question.
Yeah. No, I think you said it beautifully in terms of where people are with their minds, and I love how you speak on behalf of all men. It's
Oh
I
yeah.
know you're speaking from your experience, but I think it's interesting to get this different perspective, which is why I want to have you on, because you're bringing this level of honesty and openness to this conversation around there are other sides to building a business and being a leader and being an entrepreneur and being quote unquote successful that need to be considered. And I think you're telling a lot
Right.
of good stories around your experience.
Yeah, yeah. What I was thinking was there was a point where like, again, I think deep down, like we are all wired for relationship. That's how God made us. Like we weren't meant to be alone. We weren't meant to, that's why, Adam and Eve were made together, like to partner together and to grow and to expand. Like that was the plan. And I never stopped during all this growth. Just pause and just say, hey, we're generating over $500,000 a month, profit rich business. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
When there's other things falling, like how did I not have the ability to stop or to slow down or to say, hey, let's stabilize this? And you can apply this to any area of your life. I mean, you could have a great physique and you're trying to get bigger or leaner, and you don't think that, like, let's just make sure like my health is in check before I try and go to this next level. And I get it. Like I wear a shirt that says level up or level off. Like that's my brand, level up or I do believe that we have to be constantly up leveling. But I think during the up leveling, there's times where like you just got to hang out at a certain level on the staircase and kind of get used to the altitude before we start climbing again, and saying,
Yeah.
why do we need to keep climbing? And maybe we do, but or maybe we have to go start climbing somewhere else. And if I just said like, hey, we have more than enough to like heck retire. And if we had actually just paused and said, what are we doing here? What do we need? What do we want? How are we trying to bless others? And we had just kind of slowed things down, because at that point in the game, it was not about needs. All
Right.
of our needs were covered. It was about
Right.
wants.
Wants.
And
And then
something
really,
my
what
dad,
did you even want? Could you even have articulated it, or were you just on this train that you didn't want to
yeah,
stop?
and you start to associate with other guys who are climbing the same line, and you're trying to keep up. And guess what? It
Yeah.
all goes back to that trauma that was never resolved when I was a 15-year-old boy who was just trying not to feel behind. My whole life just turned into a race. It's kind of
Right.
funny that like my whole life is representative of like my running days. And I think a lot of men just don't realize that a lot of their issues come from their wants. And something my dad said is, he was a pastor for 19 years, and he said, um, you have to make sure that you want what your wants get you.
Mm.
Like, have you processed like what your wants are going to give you? Like, if you want that next level of success, that's going to come with something. And I actually was like, I didn't want more pressure. I actually didn't want a bigger team. But I was so attached to like it was like I was feeding the shadow side of, hey, I need to keep up with these guys. My friends who started at the same level as me, time as me, they're at this level. I need to keep up because I wanted to be validated by them. So a lot of this all comes back to validation as well. I was seeking validation in people that didn't actually matter. And instead of seeking validation, well, one for myself, for like, actually, hey, that's not my race. I'm going to stay in my lane. And then also just making sure that, hey, is this what we're trying to build as a family? And it wasn't. It was like what I wanted to build. Don't get me wrong. She loved the lifestyle and what came with it. But like, I'm in an 8,000 square foot home here in Tennessee right now. And don't get me wrong, the kids love the pool. They love the cold plunge. They
But they
don't
would
get
love
me
a
wrong.
pool,
They,
behind a trailer park probably too, right?
they,
Like, I mean,
right. I
yeah.
asked them the other day, I said, we've lived in 5 houses in the last 12 months. And I said, which one was your favorite one? They said the 1,800 square foot rental we had recently in Toronto. I said, how come? And they said, because it had a trampoline in the backyard and you come
Aw.
play with us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what they remember. They remember dad on the trampoline with them. We can put a trampoline anywhere.
Yeah. I love what great wisdom from your father about make sure you want what your wants will get you. Because I think, and even pausing, how often do we pause in our lives for ourselves and think about where am I going? What am I doing? We're all in this rat race. I mean, even if you're not building a 7-figure company and you're just working to put food on the table for your family, you're building a business, whatever stage you're at. How often do we stop and think and go, are we on the path we really want to be on? Are we after things that we really want? Should we be shifting gears? And then the other side of that is, should you be doing that in your relationship? Probably. Should you be doing that in your business with your team? Like, are we really headed in the right direction, or are we just sailing on the momentum here? Because I'll tell you, and I've said this before, there's something about our society and culture where we frown upon rest. We frown upon, refueling. And I say this all the time. If you were on a long road trip to the greatest destination of your life, it would be insane if you didn't stop and refuel and rest, and you would never get to the great place, and you would never enjoy this amazing road trip if you didn't have those rest stops, which is why they're so critical. But for some reason, we've turned that into a dirty word. And even, I mean, you're very familiar with the bodybuilding world, and I know enough about that space to know that rest days are just as important as workout days, right? What it does for your body, what it does for your mind. So I think it's something that maybe, it sounds like a journey that you're on to remind people that it's okay to rest, it's okay to refocus, it's okay to rebuild, take a moment and pause, make sure you're on the right track, because there's nothing worse than running really fast in a direction that will ultimately be a brick wall that you'll run into because it's not even what you want, or it's not even going to, or it's just going to be another wall you're going to jump over and keep running. So, um, I appreciate that. I think that's really good advice for people listening, is to really understand where they are and what they're headed towards. And I know you said this to me, but you would trade in all these things, all the money, all the houses, to put your family back together. Um, and it's a good lesson for everybody listening to think, how much do we need? Understands your wants versus your needs. They're two very different things. And I think that's
Mhm.
a good exercise. I want to talk to you about um, your journey a little bit, because I mean, you started working online and working on YouTube before it was what we know it as today. I mean, we're talking 20 plus years ago. You had this vision. I love from your website. I'm going to read a quote from your website. You're familiar with it, but you talked about you were 22 and you spent $50,000 on a kinesiology degree. We went to the
Mhm.
same university,
Very happy.
and you found yourself working $10 an hour at a local YMCA to teach old guys how to use the back extension machine. So, and then you
Yeah.
asked your boss for a raise, and she's like, "Well, if you do a good job, Vince, maybe in a year we'll give you $1 raise." And you said, "No way! I got to go find a way to make my own money." And I thought that was really funny because entrepreneurship was not what it is now. Like back then, I mean, I think entrepreneurship today, it's courses being taught at Ivy League schools. It's, um, you and I were entrepreneurs. I mean, the rate of new businesses opening is exponential in terms of what it was years ago. Why did you want to? I mean, besides wanting to make more money, I suppose, and not help old guys use the back machine, but what? Why did you say I want to do this by myself? I'm going to go into business for myself.
First word that comes to mind is curiosity.
Hmm.
It was almost well, you know, some of the guys I hung out with back in Western. I hung out with
I
all the
do.
guys the girls wanted to be with, and the guys wanted to be. You know, I hung out with the big buff dudes who'd been like the rip guys on Instagram. Like I feel like we lived in the Instagram real days back in Western, but but those are the guys
Before it
who
even existed. Yeah.
I was influenced by that muscle, that I was curious to know, like, if I had that muscle, would I get that attention too? I feel
Hmm.
like it was a curiosity of could I actually make money online? And the curiosity was so small. It was literally, could I make enough to pay my bills? Like my big win when I started my online business was to make an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a month. I
Hmm.
never heard of the term six figure earner, millionaire. Like those were foreign concepts. Like I don't think I ever heard of the term millionaire until I was like
Hmm.
24 years old. Maybe even, yeah, 23, 24 years old. Like that wasn't a term that was in my home. Um, I never heard that. So it wasn't like, it was more of a curiosity when I understood what a millionaire was. And I'm like, I wonder if I could achieve that. But I wasn't driven by, to be honest, anything external. The most external thing I can recall was there was a few things. One, if I could make an extra 2 to 3K per month, I'd be able to cover my bills. And I wanted to also get a nice car. I wanted to drive an
Hmm.
Acura RSX, which isn't even a super expensive car, but it was like my dream car. And the other thing I love the concept of was not having an alarm clock. I remember hearing a guy say that at an event, and I'm like, that's so cool, not having an alarm clock. Those are my drivers, not having an alarm clock and
What do you
covering
mean
my
by not
bills.
having an alarm clock? Just that you'd be able to wake
I
up on
didn't
your own,
have
or you'd
to,
be so
yeah,
happy to wake up?
I didn't have to work. I didn't have to go to work for somebody else because I
Oh, I
worked set,
see. Got it.
I could be at work
Of
for 8
course.
a.m. So I didn't have to wake up. I could wake up whenever I wanted
That's
to.
funny.
Now everybody's into the 4 a.m. routines, the 5 a.m. cold plunge in the first 30 minutes of the day. But no one
No, thank
talked
you.
about that in 2022. Like it
You're
was
right.
about like sleeping in. The goal is to sleep in. And what the goal wasn't to
Yeah.
do a cold plunge 5 minutes after waking up.
I think we need to bring back the sleeping in. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
just where
yeah,
my
yeah.
mind
Whatever
goes. I'd
happened?
like
What
to
was
sleep
wrong? What
in,
was,
have a coffee, and people think I'm so
you know,
successful because I do that.
it's interesting. I
Yeah.
just did a podcast with my top guy, and he just hit a first 400,000 euros a month, which is 600K in
Oh my
USD.
goodness.
And he started out 5 years ago making $2,000 a month, and now he's running this multi-seven-figure business. And I asked him, like, you know, what's your day look like? And one of his things is I sleep in. He said the most important thing in my success is my sleep. I sleep 7.5 to 8 hours a day. I don't do morning routines. He goes, I wake up when I want to wake up, and I take my sweet ass time in the morning. And I'm like, it's so kind of refreshing to hear. Like,
Well, isn't that the greatest part of, well, let's say being successful is you get to have choices. You can live the life. Isn't
right.
that what we all want? Don't you just want to live the life you want to live? I mean, with an alarm
Yes.
clock or without an alarm clock, I guess. But
I
I
think
love
this
that.
is
He sounds like my
this
kind of people.
and I think what the pair, whether you agree with this like example or not, isn't the point. The point is that these people are living their authentic self. Like
Yeah.
this is what he wanted when he got into the business. And I think where a lot of trauma, chaos starts to arise in our lives is when we aren't pursuing peace as the foundation of our life. And, you know, whenever you're out of alignment with who you truly are, you're going to create chaos in your life.
Hmm.
And, you know, I think we can easily get away from like what brings me peace. Well, what brought me peace was like creating my YouTube videos, was having a leaner team, having higher profits, having a simple business model. Next thing you know, I'm into like bigger teams, bigger events, bigger payroll. Like
You're
I
not
was
making your
all
own
bigger
videos.
problems.
Yeah.
I lost like, why did I get in? This isn't even why I got into this in the first place. So I think there's so many influences out there. I think having a sense of peace is something that people should embrace again, and to have a feeling of like contentment. Like that word contentment, when I came to Tennessee, I never really understood that concept where people were content with less. And it really messed with me because a lot of the guys I was hanging out with were like very loud alpha males on, guys you probably already know who I'm talking about, who are just projecting like more, bigger, 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 acquire more cars, bigger mansions, more trips. And it's just like that success. And if you're not doing that, the message was you're selfish because you're not thinking of anybody but yourself and you're not trying to impact the world. And I fell for that message. I fell for that. That was my justification to work longer and harder. Once I had my rock bottom moment, I realized this was all just rooted in insecurities. And it's very dangerous to build your life around somebody else's insecurities.
I'm curious, as I'm hearing you speak, you've clearly done the work. And I suspect it was not easy work to do. And it's not easy to talk about, even though you're so willing to. What has the response been? Besides, you've mentioned some of your clients who are like, listen, I'm here to learn how to make money, but are you attracting maybe a new audience, or are you hearing from people that you maybe wouldn't have heard from before as you start to share this more vulnerable kind of self-discovery journey that you're on with your followers?
I've had a tough time with it, because it's something way further down the road that I don't think most people are dealing with right now and can't relate to. Most people coming to me have no interest in like figuring out their past. They want to make more money. End of story. I hired you to help me make more money. That is my problem. I don't need to worry about, better. I just actually need bigger right now. So, there has been some not backlash, but I've even heard like kind of, you know, people thinking that it's like, Vince is kind of, he's getting soft. He's kind of lost him. Like he isn't the edgier Vince that we like and that we want. And that's just a reflection of like where they're at in life. And I totally understand that. I totally appreciate that. Like I said, most men need to be hit with a sledgehammer before they wake up and are like see the value in what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, it isn't really a sexy message that sells. I'll be honest.
Yet.
Most
I'm going to
people
say
are
yet. Because
right.
I think there's a whole group of people out there who will build much better businesses and better lives, more importantly, by hearing what you have to say. It might take some time to sink in and they may be stubborn about it, but you're going to keep laying the sledgehammers. And I
Yeah,
suspect that people will start to hear this message and you'll attract a whole new following of people who this will resonate, this will seem more real and relevant, and the impact you will have, I think, is the impact you're actually looking to have in
yeah.
a
It's a
deeper,
you,
bigger way.
you actually just nailed it, and that's kind of like understanding is the definition. Like you have to define impact. Like I saw what my dad did was he was a disciple, or so what that means is that he come along men and he walk with them through life.
Mm,
And everybody's called to a different thing. For me, that wasn't like so much for me. I felt like I don't want to have impact on just like he's been having breakfast with the same four guys for the last 20 years. I'm like
mm,
that's way too much information about four guys. Like I'd rather have, but then that also expresses my ability to go deep with people versus his ability to go deep with people. That's just like way too much information about one person I want to know. I would rather be on stage. I'd rather have a podcast. I'd rather have a YouTube channel. No, I'm impacting that. We're all called to different things, but
right.
I'm starting to see the value in going deeper with people, in a way that's fulfilling. That's a lot different than just saying we have 3,000 people in our program versus we have 300 people in our program and I know every single one by name. And
Yep.
I feel like they're all family. Again, I'm not saying there's one that's right or wrong. We're all called to different paths, but I think you really need to be in alignment with like, what am I building? And you are right. I think a lot of people privately message me. I've had a couple of guys who are making 50 to 60 grand a month consistently who've been in my program for a while. And when they all came out, they said, Vince, I've been under pressure to scale. I actually don't want to scale. I love
Mm,
spending the weekends with my girlfriend and going on trips and the business model I have right now. And they said they were starting to feel guilty for that. And I said, two things. One, obviously, if God's calling you to another level, you're going to know, listen to those prompts. I'm not promoting, my message is not one of settling or, coasting and like not going after it. But I'm also saying, like, if you're not content with what you currently have in your life, right? And I truly believe that everything comes from God. Everything comes from the line I say, it's his to give and ours to manage. And if you're not content with what you have, you're basically saying like you're not content with what he's given you. And I don't think God can bless somebody if there's not a foundation of gratitude for what you have. So I feel like a lot of people don't get to the next level because they take everything they currently have for granted. And I don't only believe God can bless people if they're in a place of humility and humbleness and gratitude to truly feel blessed. And um, I feel like um, that's a journey that takes people to get to, because your recognition is no longer so much like on social media, which is public affirmation, which is where most people get their identity, how many vanity metrics they have. When you have a smaller community but better relationships, it's hard to broadcast that. Like, how do you make
Right.
a reel about that? You know what I mean? But it's understanding that you're not getting your validation from other people's insecurities, which are vanity metrics. So you really need to figure out what's most important. And I think it starts with understanding the feelings you want to have, the desired feelings you want to have at the end of your
Yeah.
day, the end of your week, the end of your life. And some of the feelings that I want to have is like, I lived a purposeful life. I lived an impactful life. I had a positive life. I had also peace in my life. I feel that's, I want to have a level. I don't want to wake up in panic every morning. And it's not a good feeling. I mean, so
Yeah.
you have to kind of just redefine what makes you feel successful and then build your life around that. And that might require, hey, you know what? If I go to 150 members in my community, it's too stressful. I have to manage 6 coaches instead of 2, and I don't want to manage 6 coaches. Guess what? You're protecting your well being so that you can be more present for the people that need you most in your life. That is not settling. That's called wisdom.
No, and even earlier when you made a comment about coasting, I mean, how lucky would someone be to be able to coast making $50,000 a month doing what they love and getting to travel and spend time with their girlfriend? I don't see that coasting as a negative thing. And take it from someone who just spent 20 years in the corporate world, who has downsized to a company of one. I don't have a lot of followers. I don't have, I just hit 1,000 downloads on this podcast, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's huge to me because I'm living in alignment with my values. I'm doing what matters to me. And when I get 2 or 3 people reach out and share the impact some of my messages or my work or comments that my guests have made, that matters way more than me having a million likes or a million followers who are kind of grazing through and skimming through what I'm doing and not even really caring about what I'm doing. So I
Hmm.
suspect there's a lot of greatness and impact in your future that looks like you helping people build amazing businesses, but more importantly, amazing lives, where at the end of it, they're going to feel so incredible and fulfilled based on what you helped them do, that you're the leader. You know more than they know right now. You know that the emptiness that comes with just going after the money is not worth it. And that's up to you to teach them that. So I think that's what's in your future. And I continue to admire how much you put yourself out there. I don't put myself out there as much as you do. I mentioned this right off the bat. I don't get into a lot of details about my personal life, my political views, my religious views. Um, I think it's great that you put yourself out there if that's what you want to do. And I especially think it's great that you're putting all this incredibly vulnerable and introspective stuff out there, because inevitably, if it connects with 10 people and saves 10 marriages and saves 10 families, it's worth it. So I admire that and I commend you for that. And I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely. It was great. I had a great time as well.
We only have like a minute or two left, but I'd like to do some rapid fire with you if you're up for it, because I know you're also a fun guy. All
Let's do it.
right. So I'm curious about the last time you tried something new.
Oh, a week ago, I went whitewater skiing. I went, what's it called? Water skiing.
Oh, water
This,
skiing.
but like, I don't know if you can see this, but I have to take oh, you can't see it. Oh, I ripped my whole shoulder like right out of my socket, and I tore my
Oh my
lat
gosh.
and my tricep.
So yeah, the last time I tried something new, I was about 2 weeks ago because my son went and he's 8 years old, so he went 8 attempts. I was so proud of him, but like he swallowed a lot of water. Poor little guy, he was crying, but he kept going, kept going. He did get up a few times, but couldn't stay up. And then I went, and then my daughter went. She made it easy, the 10-year-old, and yeah, so yeah, about 2 weeks ago went water skiing. Oh, and
Good
this
for
yesterday in
you.
the pool, me and my son are trying to do 1 minute underwater. So
Okay.
we're up to we're up to a whopping 30 seconds. All felt like 5 minutes. So we're working on our breathing at the end of the
Good for
day.
you. Good for you. I love when our children
Breathing.
do stuff that make it look easy. This is like my first experience with cold plunging. My 11-year-old daughter jumps in up to her neck and sits there with a smile on her face, and then I get in, I almost died. I
Yeah.
thought, "You little monkey for making this look so easy." But I think that's amazing. If you weren't doing all of this and the world said to you, you have to start over in a new business, new career, what would you do?
I want to be a country music singer.
Is that the Tennessee influence seeping into your blood
Probably.
now?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Not saying that'd be a good one, but I would do something completely different. Like, yeah, I think that would be super cool to be
That's amazing.
a musician, specifically a country artist.
I love it. And what about if you could just off the top of your head, really quickly, kind of three quick tips for people building an online business? What would you share?
Number one, figure out what you're most passionate about and could do for free the rest of your life
Hmm,
because it's going to get tough. So you're going to have passion for what you do to get through the tough times. Number two, I would say, understand like content is your legacy. So create content, and essentially just become the best version of you and then give that version of you to the world through your social media. And then number three, I would get around people that can guide your steps. You got to be in the right environment. So that means, mentors, coaches, masterminds. You've got to be surrounded by people who can buy you knowledge, speed, relationships, accountability. So those would be my three.
love it. I love all that advice. Well, I feel like we could have continued this conversation for much longer. And I'm so thrilled it's the conversation that almost didn't happen, but that definitely happened. And we talked about a lot of great stuff today. I would love to see you keep sharing these types of messages on your social. I think they're so impactful. And I really enjoy hearing this type of stuff from you. And I absolutely wish you all the best. And maybe we'll actually meet in person one day soon.
Yeah, well, I'll be in Toronto in the fall. So yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good. I wish you all the best. Have a great summer with the kids, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Marcel. That was great.
Thanks, Vince.